All right, guys. So we can sort of wait for everyone to get back on it. I just resent the link to Anne Marie and to Susan as well, who are here. It looks like we dropped a couple people off. So oh, Susan's coming on right now. 1 second. All right. Okay. So where we left it, we can go ahead and just start with the interest of time, and as people come on, we can see if they have anything else to add for specifically the March 11th meeting where we were. But Tony, I know you had some comments for the March 11th hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we heard some things we hadn't heard before from Attorney Eisen, specifically about the prospect for preemptive litigation. I had never heard of that, and the quote that I wrote down from him was to try and have the PMC work available as soon as practical. And so I was kind of interested, what does that mean? What does that entail in terms of having it available as soon as practical? I think we're doing that, like having our criteria ready, Professor Ducham's on board, and there's maps coming out. But, that to me was, important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of, kind of the foresight on, how litigious this may be is, in the purview of what we're doing right now. I think, the acquisition of legal team from the legislator kind of painted the picture. And so, I think kind of going into it, with our eyes open and kind of expecting that may be the case would be for the best. But I agree with you. I think the way that we're going right now and sort of remaining transparent and, working with Moon and Liz and we lost Liz too. In the process.
I'll get her back.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Any other thoughts from March 11th, guys? You guys said.
I'm just curious, Tony. Did you, when you followed up with your additional questions, you didn't have time to ask? Was one of them to like, what does as soon as practical means? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I had sent some questions to Attorney Idlis, who was going to send them to Attorney Eisen, and one of them was exactly that. What does it mean to be ready as soon as practical? Yeah.
Okay, good.
The other question, which I didn't get to ask, was, is there any pathway where, like, our legislature could slow things down? If we don't get the census until September, is there any pathway to slow things down such that the state is forced to use the prior maps in 2022? Different subject, but kind of interesting. I don't know if anybody helping us has any opinions on that. But.
Hey, Betty.
I don't know if Jack might have thoughts on that, but perhaps he's dealing with other things on the other end of things. I guess I'm not an attorney, but I would say, like, you guys should continue to do your work and worry about, like, the maps that the commission is creating. Jack, I'll let you chime in if you have.
That's exactly what I would say, is that I can't, either because I don't have the imagination or the willingness to try to imagine all the things the legislature might do, but I think that the most important thing the commission do is just simply what it's doing. And I agree, Tony, with your characterization that you guys are already doing what you can do to get the maps out as quick as possible. I mean, I'm sure that Moon could tell you that we could draw some maps today, but they wouldn't be very good because we don't have the right data. You've not thought through everything. So it seems that you guys are doing everything as deliberatively at as good of a pace as one can without sacrificing quality, which is, I think, me personally, all this commission can do. Whether the legislature delays or comes out with them sooner, because there are ways around, in some states at least, and I think this one, using the census data. There's nothing in our Constitution that says you must use that data. Now, your maps might be judged against it later, so you better think about the data. But either way, that's not obviously what you guys are doing. It seems to me right to continue to just do it as quickly as you can without sacrificing quality. I don't know what the legislature is going to do, and we could talk ourselves in circles trying to come up with what they're going to do. And I don't think it would be healthy for us in a bunch of ways, but for one, I mean, we'd be assigning motive to them. Who knows? They'll come out with some maps, and if they're fair, then everyone in the whole state should be happy. And if they're not, hopefully yours are. So that's the way I think that's the way I look at it. I think that's the way the governor's office looks at it, and I think that's the way you should.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on March 11th, guys? I know Emery and Susan and Melissa are here now, so. Okay, sounds good. So just in moving forward, guys, we just wanted to at least get the conversation going. One thing that we've been trying to hammer in the minds of the public, as well as some of our constituents, is more so to, this work isn't completed with our completion of our last hearing. Initially the hearings were scheduled with the anticipation, well, in the very beginning of all, that we would be going to each of the CDs and having this in person, but COVID had another thing to say about that. So, now with the census data being pushed back, what we're trying to do now is trying to continue our work and continue to, maintain this transparency that we have. Some of the things that we've been doing is kind of reaching out to some of the grassroots groups, as I know that you guys have in the subcommittees as well. Sort of hammering the train-the-trainer events as well. Trying to publicize that as much as possible. But in terms of discussion of the work and going forward, I know Emery, you sent out an email just talking about some of the ideas that were discussed in some of the subcommittees, and we can get into that when we do our subcommittee review as well. But just any thoughts that you guys have about sort of going forward. Our idea was more so to continue these meetings, kind of make sure the public knows about it, and perhaps even when we send out our criterion, or at least a working idea of a criterion that we have been discussing at our previous meeting as well, offer the public an opportunity to speak to that. And I know Emery, you had some great ideas too about possibly having some of our previous expert testimony providers come and speak to that as well. But I'll leave the floor open to you guys if you have any other ideas regarding that.
Could we have a session where the trainer is done for us through this mechanism that we would be able to promote, that could be custom?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds great. And also, just to give you some feedback on the grassroots mobilization, we're starting to get a lot of emails from groups around Wisconsin, and that's a really great sign. So
awesome.
I'm encouraged that the ball's rolling there. Today, we were corresponding with a school teacher who's been using Districtor and drawing maps with his class. Just a great sign. We're starting to see lots of interest.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Marissa.
Oh, no, that's the thing that I've been hearing too from the grassroots is that we had talked to them maybe by having something towards the end of March where it would be directed for Wisconsin, and it would kind of incorporate some of the PMC's definition of community of interest along with the pieces that your PowerPoint has in it that asks good questions that they should be thinking about when they start mapping communities of interest. One of the organizations here on the west side of Wisconsin said, we threw together your slide deck, Moon, and then also our definition, our working definition from that document. And two of the people there said that they had time to look at it and try to merge it together a little bit for what they think would be good. So hopefully towards the end of the week, we can offer that up to everyone's review.
Sounds great. We'll work on pulling together a good, staff to run a late March Wisconsin specific training. So just
yeah.
Awesome.
It might be interesting either overtly or inovertly to do it sort of following the criteria that we're laying out as proposed, and to show like what happens when you put number 5 first. And so it might also be a little bit of a persuasive opportunity for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, that might be, Susan, just the one thing that just for the train of thought that at least a small little subgroup that we are taking this project to you guys for COI group is that we were thinking that people might not even be aware of criteria and mapping. So we're kind of making it towards like the simplest way possible and not
Exactly.
even getting into a lot of the nuts and bolts of redistricting. So just so you know, that's where it's coming from. And we can change it. There's no.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, guys, about any ideas in going forward? Moon, do you think that you know, in terms of the logistics of getting a train-the-trainer event for us here, do you you know, any ideas of you know, what we all need for that or anything? You know, I know that you have your set dates that you normally will do them, but
Yeah, we're happy to extend. The students who've been running those, they're getting really good at it. They're great ambassadors, and they're definitely looking at ways to kind of build on what we have. Actually, one thing that you may have noticed if you've been to our sign up form recently is that starting March 24th, we're going to diversify the trainings so that Monday trainings will be like big picture and Wednesday trainings will be come to draw.
Oh, cool.
So because we're starting to get some requests for like a level 2. So actually we're developing the communications around this right now, but the plan is Mondays come to hear why COIs are important, then come to a Wednesday to be interviewed and draw a map or two of your communities, and then come back on a Wednesday to be an interviewer. So this is sort of the model for how we're hoping to like build out the mapping, you know, exponentially, if you permit me my literal mathematician speak, right? Is that once people come and draw, they can come and bring others and draw with them. And so this is why we called it train the trainer. The idea is that people would come and then communicate those interview skills to others who would communicate it to others, and we'd get kind of a rapid growth of people who have a pretty good idea of what kind of mapping is going to help you guys when you sit down to draw the lines.
Yeah, so Maddie, maybe a next action point that we have is we can try to send out a doodle and see, you know, with Moon's group as well as with all the commissioners, when would be a good, you know, good time and date to do that for everyone. Thanks. All right, guys.
So just to clarify, that would be a train the trainer specific event. For us, it would be live stream similar to this, but it would only include the commissioners versus additional people who are interested in like participating. So like we wouldn't invite community members or anything to that one. We would point community members towards the other train the trainer events that already exist.
Right. Yeah. The idea would be to have something, you know, specifically for us that can be live streamed, like you said, and then, you know, kind of build, you know, some promotion from that aspect and give us some hands-on as well. And then we can definitely build it out beyond that or refer it to that video for the community representatives. So.
And then Susan, you recommended that could potentially, that event could take place in coordination or around the same time we release the criteria.
It's just a thought.
I think that makes sense. So that the doodle poll will probably inform our availability, but also when we want to publish the criteria might inform what result from the doodle poll we go with.
Yeah. And that may be a good segue into what we've been talking about before. So we can go ahead and go into the subcommittee. Unless anyone else had anything else for thoughts of kind of work going forward, but I think we're all in agreement that kind of having these meetings and kind of keeping the, you know, our finger on the pulse is probably the best option to stay relevant here. So, so we can go ahead and start with the line drawers committee. Feel free, Anne-Marie or Tony, to go ahead and talk about the document. Did everyone get a copy of the most up-to-date document? Okay.
Yeah, I'll start, but Moon, I want to respect your time.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys sent this email. I'll just read the first sentence that Liz sent and maybe ask you to explain it a little more. For new mapping updates, This afternoon, we pushed out our district drawing modules with the 2019 population data on 2020 wards. This replaces our previous modules where you balance the 2010 population across the district. Could you put that into more English for us non-techie?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we've been working on for a little while for you, is to get the most recent population estimates from the Census Bureau so that you can balance population using recent estimates. I think this is kind of when you were talking a little earlier about what folks are trying to do while we're waiting for the delayed census data. We've been kind of thinking pretty hard about all the different data sources and all the different ways that you could do this. And this is our recommendation to you of a good way to draw districts, which if they are very well balanced with respect to 2019 population, then when that new data comes out, we'll update it immediately in all of our data products, and it'll change the balance a little bit. It will no longer be perfectly balanced, but it'll be close. And so the idea is that you'd have really good maps that are community centered, that will have to be tuned to be population balanced, but you'd have kind of your core thinking would already be present in the maps. So let me show you what that looks like. I'll share my screen. So the units that you see in this picture are the 2020 wards that have been released by the state. But as you note here in the information kind of line that we've added to population balance, this uses 2019 American Community Survey data. Let me quickly remind you what that means. So the Census Bureau, every 10 years, releases a complete enumeration of all the people, and they've really struggled with it this year, right? So that's the data that's late, is the 2020 official population. And that will, when it's released, it'll be released on tiny little pieces called census blocks. In between decennial releases, the Census Bureau conducts an extensive survey called the American Community Survey. Unlike the decennial, where the decennial you really have to go to every door and count every house, the ACS, just like it sounds like, is based on a survey. There are many people who think that survey data will be especially good this year because the decennial census, due to COVID conditions, had all kinds of trouble being sure they were reaching marginalized groups, and they've worked very, very hard to try to represent all groups. But the problem with the decennial census is that if you know you're undercounting a certain group, you can't correct that with statistics. You just have to work harder to reach all the people in that group. But the ACS can use correction techniques so that if they know, for example, that African Americans tend to be systematically undercounted, which is true, the census knows that from its post-enumeration work, then in the ACS, you can correct that statistically, right? So the ACS is likely to be an especially useful source this year because of the complications that the census had in trying to do its complete decennial enumeration. Okay, so having said all that, I hope that was more plain English, but I kind of live and breathe this stuff, so you should just tell me if I'm making sense or not. And so here's what this means, right? If you were to make 8 congressional districts using this data, this is how big each one of them would have to be. In other words, this number, 723,000, this is the estimated population of Wisconsin as our best estimate right now, divided by 8. That's how you get this ideal size. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I'm drawing and I can keep going until I get up to about that size. Let's grab Green Bay. Let's grab Appleton. Oh, there we go. Now I'm up over the size. And so if you draw a complete set of districts using this population, then that's far better than what was in Districtor yesterday. In Districtor yesterday was the 2010 population, right? But we all know that people move around, population moves. So we've updated from 2010 to the 2019, the most recent data available from the government. Of course, there are other sources of data, but this is from the nation's most trusted data source, which is the Census Bureau, based on a survey and just released last month. So this is like as fresh as data gets. Any questions about that? Okay, so this is part of, we've been working really hard to get you the best possible data product so that you can start pulling in information about communities, you can start balancing your priorities against each other, and then you can start drawing. And whatever you draw, if it's closely balanced in these units, we will update as soon as the new census data drops, and you'll have a pretty close to final map, ready for you. So it'll give you a big advantage over folks who are waiting for the data drop to even get started.
So you're saying like April, May, we'll be literally able to start drawing some maps.
Yep. In fact, you could start now, but you'll do a better job if you wait for some of this testimony to keep rolling in so that you can hear what matters to your, constituents, if you will. And armed with these words and that testimony, you'll have a really great set of tools to start drawing with.
Did you want to comment on anything else, Moon?
I took a look at the way that your language has been evolving, and I just want to say I think you're doing a great job. So you just have a big thumbs up for me. In particular, I was reading, I think that was an email from Anne-Marie today about the language around competitiveness and trying to come to language that's both understandable and like conforms with good modeling practices. And I just think you've done a great job balancing the different pressures, and I'm really liking the way your language is coming along. So, I'm here to answer any other questions that you have, but also just here to tell you that I think everything's going really well.
Okay.
Well, I just had a quick question.
Any questions for Moon? Otherwise, I'll move on to the other stuff.
Yeah, I just had a quick question just in terms of your timeline, Moon, just, with the update of the timeline, but in terms of like, a hard stop for when we would need to have, our criterion for you, what do you estimate that would be? And, how much time do we have in that time frame?
So there is no hard stop for the criteria because of the way we've planned cycles of proposals and refinements. So you could choose, even after you draw your first maps and we give you back an assessment, you might, based on that assessment, shift your criteria a bit at that point, and that would be fine. So it really is a malleable process. But right now, based on what you have, we have everything we need to start our modeling. So now that we've been working hard in the last few weeks to get that 2019 balancing up, and it's up now and available for you. And our next task is going to be building you ensembles of maps to show you kind of what's possible with respect to these new numbers. So we're turning our attention to that now. And I should have a kind of preliminary mini report for you within a week or two.
Awesome, thanks. Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, along that same line, Moon, for the communities of interest data, I know we've kind of talked about timelines and they're a little fuzzy. Do you have any hard stops or any updated timelines where you'd like to have the first big bulk of data available? Yeah,
so this has been something I've been a little nervous about recently because the maps have been coming in a little more slowly than I expected. So I think we've been talking to a whole lot of groups and trying to figure out where people are getting stuck in the kind of process of training, learning to draw, starting to draw, and recruiting others, which is kind of that like growth model that we had in mind. And something that this is why we've shifted the model so that Wednesdays are going to be Draw With Us Day. Because we think that people, here's what I'm encountering so far, and I've talked to some of to Liz and Heather and some of our other folks who are running the trainings. What we're hearing a lot is that people are intimidated by like getting it right. So if you're going to try to speak for, a particular community that you're going to name and like try to describe, we're hearing that people are feeling a lot of pressure, which should the line end here or there. And So that's why we're shifting to some more of the, you might say hand-holding, right? Just to help people feel empowered and to help them understand that our process is going to take a lot of different people's versions of a community and lay them on top of each other and see how they all compare. You don't have to get it right. You just have to give what it looks like from, you know, from where you sit. And so we're sort of modifying our curriculum, if you will, to make sure that people are understanding that there's no such thing as getting it right. There's only describing your community as it looks to you. And you don't need to coordinate with everyone else from your group. You can draw and pass it on and someone else can build on it. And that's all built into the model. So yeah, that's a little bit, so in terms of a hard stop for that, I had hoped to have hundreds of maps in by the end of March, and now I'm starting to think that we're like I said, we're seeing a really encouraging uptick in questions, and the attendance at the trainings has been climbing back up and is looking pretty strong. We'll still be fine if we're getting hundreds of maps by the middle of April. So, but within the next month, I'd really like to tick into the 3-digit range for map submissions. And we will definitely keep you posted on how that looks.
I think, yeah, you'll notice a big uptick once we get this training rolled out to the grassroots groups. I think they're kind of in a holding pattern a little bit. I know some people have just gone ahead and put some communities in there, but I think they are kind of waiting for a go ahead from us.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. And I think just doing more work, having people come to training sessions multiple times, you know, first to hear what it's about, second to try it, and then next to teach it. I think that's a really good model for getting people to start to feel empowered that the map, how the map looks is really up to them, right? Yeah, this is just, and Liz is on her way, I think, to come back, and she can tell you a little bit more about the small number of submissions, official submissions through the portal that we've seen so far. But I think, you know, talking to a lot of groups, this is my sense of taking the temperature, is that if people feel that they can come back a few times and kind of graduate from the curriculum and be like, you know, be trainers at the end of the day, I think that's really going to help get it uncorked. So yeah, no, there's no drop dead date that I have in mind for that, but I am looking to get to the hundreds within the next month. And then I think it will go viral at a certain point. That's been the model. And we'll get to the thousands, you know, by the time we're deep into the summer. And I'm looking forward to that, because that's when the kind of the data analysis piece kicks in to say, all right, now that I've got thousands of maps, how do I summarize them? How do I average them? How do I build something usable out of them? But right now we're definitely in the kind of, you know, dinner bell stage where we're trying to get everyone to the table. There's Liz. Perfect timing, Liz. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
I was just saying that just a very small handful of maps had come in over the portal, and that you had a brief summary of what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I can summarize really quickly. Let me just find my notes. Yeah, so we looked at the submissions between February 18th and March 4th. I don't think many new submissions have come in since then, but there was a total of 8. 2 of them, I think, were from Moon and Jack, just testing out the submission portal. And then one of them was just a preprint of a paper. So that didn't include any community data. There were 3 submissions from the same person, sending in iterations of a partial district plan for the state assembly, which is something that I guess we'll be aware of and look for moving forward, is just people submitting kind of evolved plans and COIs. And then one was a COI map that included community boundaries with a description of the communities. And then one unfortunately described communities, but didn't include any polygons of where it was. And so based on the description, we can kind of tell, but not know necessarily exactly the area that they were talking about. But yeah, that's a quick summary of what we've seen so far.
And that brings up a question that I had actually wanted to pose back to you all, which is, so when people submit, they're choosing to give some information like an email address. Did you have in mind possibly following up with them if we have questions to clarify their submission?
Yeah, no, I think that would be, ideal. We would have to arrange, of whom would be in charge of reaching out to them, or, if they would be comfortable, the way that we have the website set up right now, there's no way to really reply unless, someone leaves that information. We actually haven't reached out to Maddie earlier this week because someone sent me an email very specific with questions about our districtor. And, I was like, well, it's great. I got answers, but I don't know who you are, what your name is, or what your email is. So it's something that we can definitely work on here.
And we've just today actually fixed that problem. It just went live. The fix for that, and similarly, we can use the back end to, and I'm sure y'all have seen this as well, to access who the contact information and things like that. But to me, it seems appropriate for the respective CD commissioner to do that follow up. But we can figure that out, or you all can decide if that sounds right to you.
That sounds great. So if we have clarifying questions when we see a submission, we'll kick them back to you and then see if you want to follow up with the submitter.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more question for Moon and Liz on the quantity of maps. We're looking for thousands. Would you expect to see more maps from highly populated areas than you would in rural, or not necessarily? Or
I think this is going to be a function of your network of organizations. So I think you're going to see more maps from where your network reaches deepest. And I think a challenge will be, we'll keep you posted about where they're coming in. And a challenge will be how you mobilize more maps from areas that are under responding. My sense is that you'll see concentrations that are not necessarily geographical, but have more to do with social networks, right? So at some point, someone will get excited about this and post on Facebook or post on Twitter in a way that will mobilize their network. And so actually, I think we're going to see a very interesting demonstration of how social networks interact with geography by just tracking where the maps come from. Yeah, and again, we're set up really nicely to just show you where we're seeing. We'll show you a map of Wisconsin, and you'll see where the maps are coming in. We'll let you know how you're doing with that, and that's going to be testing your outreach to partner organizations.
so our goal should be really to make sure that we have coverage across the state. I mean, that will be our major thing that we're looking for.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see you hit all the congressional districts. I'd love to see you hit lots of the counties, maybe all. That I think that those will be various kinds of barometers of how far you're reaching around the state and how far the word's getting out that you want to hear from people.
So I appreciate that an effective and efficient way is to go through organizations that we're connected with. What are your thoughts on more public open advertising, if you will, to try to get more diverse input? And is that effective from like a public relations campaign?
Well, I think this is the first cycle where we're seeing this tested, and I keep complimenting you, but here's another one. You're just way out ahead of a lot of the other states that we're working with. So I think a lot of states will be looking to you and seeing how the mapping evolves around Wisconsin and thinking about their strategy. So having said that, these are a little bit untested waters, but I will say that 10 years ago, when Utah did redistrictutah.com, they got a lot of press about it, and it was that press that drew a lot of people.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, and so I've already done a little bit of chatting with journalists in Wisconsin, and you all are well connected, and so I think radio, newspaper, just as much as these kinds of social network options are really good ways to get eyeballs on the submission site and to get maps coming in. So we'll continue to be offering media availability in Wisconsin. And I think you all should use your media access as well to try to get people excited about this way of communicating.
And Maddie and Molly and I have been working with this effort as well in order to kind of touch bases with our media outlets, as well as some folks throughout the state, some special interest groups throughout the state too, and actually had a hosted calls this morning before this meeting. So we're moving in that respect. So.
Okay, should I go ahead with the line drawer subcommittee?
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Okay, well, thanks Moon and Liz, and thank you very much for that great presentation. So in terms of the line drawing subcommittee, I spoke with Anne Marie this morning, and there's really two things to address. One, I'll address, the other thing she'll address. One, the criteria themselves, the way we've put them down and ranked them. So we've left that as kind of preliminary. We had said we wanted to wait until the last district hearing and respect that district hearing to see what other comments we were getting, and not really pushing for a more complete consensus. But I guess that would be one thing tonight is, does any of the commissioners have a concern about the criteria or the ranking of the criteria, not the messaging of it, but the actual criteria? Or, Chair Ford, can we say, is there, again, preliminary consensus on the criteria?
Yeah, Tony, I agree. I think from our last hearing, I feel that we had a general consensus, but feel free if there's any dissent, guys, to go ahead and speak. I don't want to speak for you, but I think some of the language that we've gone through and everyone has reviewed. I know there were some other updates and corrections and pointers that, as far as the language in general. But other than that, I think as far as the preliminary ranking, before we can kind of go into some prelim maps and go forward public, put it out for public display. I think that's fine. But feel free, guys, if you have any other thoughts about it.
So any other concerns to express about the actual criteria or the ranking? Otherwise, the second thing is about the messaging, the memo that Anne Maria started and done an excellent job, and I'll turn it over to her for that.
Okay, thanks. And you all received a copy, and there's been comments coming in, many of them just today, refining some of the language. And one of the ideas is that we want to keep it pretty simple and not just kind of like direct, this is the decisions that we've made and this is the way it's occurring, without going into a lot of rationale on it. I think that kind of rationale discussion can go into our report that we're going to have. This thing, the way in my mind, it's kind of having written a lot of informed consent documents for people that are in clinical trials. You write them very simply and just kind of statements. So that's kind of the idea of this document, just to keep it really straightforward. So I think what I'd like to do is Jack sent some comments, and again, I might change some of the wording that I get because I'm trying to keep it in very simple language. And I'll send it out. I think the best thing to do is for everybody to maybe give a final review. I think we're all anxious to get this out into the public. The way we wrote this now is that at the bottom of this document, it says we're taking comments on the criteria through May 31st, and gives the link where they can add it. So that could be pasted up on the website, as a PDF. But in order to get more feedback on that from the public and to really start a discussion. One of the things we could do, and this is a discussion I think that I know our grassroots supporters support this idea as well, is to get that document out there and then have a hearing on it. And possibly we could invite some of the experts we've seen before that are, our more technical ones, with Ruth Greenwood, Keith Gaddy, Ken Meyer, and Michael Lee are the ones that come to mind, and we might think of other ones or to not use all of them, but maybe just have a hearing, have them discuss the criteria, the strengths or weaknesses, whatever they might see a problem that we can't anticipate, and then have open testimony after that because the public has had a chance to see it. And then we could just take all that and maybe tweak what we finally use. So I'm anxious to hear people's opinion on that. And you too, Moon, too, as well, because some of our feedback might actually change it a little bit. But that's the thought.
I think it's a fabulous idea, Anne-Marie. Also, we would want to have it really structured so that we're able to capture it in ways that we can work with it. And having the experts there first to help us do that would be very helpful, I think. Because when I read the document, it says it's taking comment, I thought, number one, as someone who's commenting, how will I know how it's being used, or what are we intending to use it for? And then also, from our side, what are we really willing to adjust if we get 90% saying go this way and we were intending to go this way, like how are we going to moderate that? And I think having a session where we also have experts there may open up, may tweak our minds as well. And that way we also continue with the transparency of doing it out in the public. So I think it's a really interesting idea. I had just one thought on the document. The way that you write in plain language is, I'm sure it's so hard to do, but it's so welcomed and so well done. So thank you. I just had a thought on the words higher, medium, and low priority. And I was reading it through the lens of someone who isn't really a fan of what we do. And they're reading our criteria. And I could see the headline that says the People's Maps Commission doesn't believe that, believes that competitiveness is a low priority, or something like that. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to structure that document so it's more neutral language, where we just simply say tier 1, tier 2, 2, 3, 4, and we might not have the words in there priority. I don't know. I'm just thinking ahead of how that might be interpreted.
That's a good thought. Maybe we can think of another way to put it.
I don't know, because competitive seems to make so much sense to so many of us, right?
Right.
And so I'm just projecting. I may be way off, but Moon's looking quizzically.
I'm thinking about it. I think that's really, certainly there's no harm just calling them tier 1, tier 2, but it might trigger some of the same reaction. Why is
Yeah.
tier 4? So I was just thinking about, that was my thinking face, whether calling them stage 1, stage 2 still captures a lot of the intent, but just calling something stage 4 doesn't sound like it's unimportant, right? And so I was really just trying to think through, and I will continue to think this through after the call. Does that capture what's needed? In other words, first you attend to these. Once you've attended to these, you pay attention to these, so that you can think of it as stages rather than priority tiers.
Yeah, or sequences or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would work, but I want to try. I'm gonna test some things out and get back to you on whether that's an honest and not just rebranded description of how to handle it. But it doesn't sound. That sounds possible to me. That works. To be continued.
Would it be true to think of it as a recursive sort of process where we might hit, if we say priority 1 or stage 1 and 2, and then we might see something like really out of whack, so then we go back up to stage 1 and stage 2 again? Or is that not?
Certainly what the whole hope is to do rounds of drawing, but let me try to articulate something that's intended by the tier language, and let's brainstorm together about whether it works equally well as stage language. So partly what's intended is, among things that equally well satisfy higher tier, you can use the lower tier to like break a tie or make a decision, right? But you can't sacrifice higher tier things to improve lower tier things. That's the reasoning of the tiers. I think that translates pretty well to talking about them as stages. So you'd say stage 1 is, look for things that are very, right? Think about it as winnowing, right? You have all the plans in the world, which is a unthinkable number. And then you sort of sieve them to the ones that are very good at your top tier list. And that leaves you with a smaller set. And then you winnow a little further to the things that are very good at your next tier. I think, so tier language captures that really well, but I think stage language does too. So calling it first stage doesn't rule out that you can, after you've thought about stage 3, you can still go back to think about things that were earlier in the sequence. So yeah, thought, Howard?
Yeah, go ahead, Howard.
Well, I'm not sure about this, but it seems like you're talking about two different things. One of them is you've come to a sort of value judgments, at least well, for the time being, sort of tentatively about what's important. And then you're also talking about process.
That's
And
right.
those are two very different things. And I think why what's puzzling here is how your description of your sense of how the process will work somehow corrupts your value judgments, or vice versa. The value judgments seem to interfere with the process. So it may be that those things have to be described separately. In other words, if you come to decisions about which of the criteria are primary, and again, tentative decisions, which ones really are the ones that are the most important, that can be said. And then you can describe how you're going to go about that. Those are two different things. I think if you try to do them as if it was one text, a single text, I think you're going to confront Anne-Marie what you're asking about. You're going to be stuck in it. It's going to be baffling. Okay. So I think if you may be a little anxious now about making a value statement because you're going to run into other people's values. Okay. And I think that's why you have to emphasize a sort of tentativeness about it, because you're open-minded. But the point is, at the moment, this is where you are in terms of what you think is most important and what you think is either less important or what will follow from making important decisions. And then you can describe how you're going to go about doing that. I've seen this done in other settings, and it's a tricky piece of business. I think that I was sort of hoping that at some point you, Anne-Marie, or your committee, however you're doing this, would prepare a document of several sentences, not a long document. There's several sentences in the layman's level, the way you're doing it. Put that before your colleagues, get them in a meeting, I think, where you're all looking at the same document at the same time, to go through it almost word by word. Okay, and see, is the right word, priorities is the right word, just the very kind of conversation you have now, and edit it together until you're satisfied with that as a statement of your priorities. Then it seems to me you would write another document in which you would describe to yourselves maybe, but also to the rest of the world, what you're going to do next now that you have that document. Okay. I think if you try to do it all in simple sentences, a few simple sentences, it's not going to be as clear as you want it to be. I'll just put it that way.
Quick
Go ahead, Mo.
and Oh, sorry, whenever you have a moment.
No, I say go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, quick reaction, and then I have to jump off the call in a few minutes. But I totally take your point, Howard. I think it's an important point that your values are separable from your process. But in this case, it might be the relevance of coming to a collective statement of values. The relevance of that in practical terms is how it will dictate a process. So I agree that sort of talking principles is a separable and possibly a good thing to do. But I feel that if the criteria piece, the word criteria can mean values or it can mean ways of measuring, right? It sort of could mean either. And I think it would be a perfectly reasonable choice to make an operational document. In other words, to focus on process in the document is a completely reasonable choice.
I don't mean to suggest that it isn't. I just think that if you try to, I think that if you want to write simple language so that people really have a sense that they are participating and that they understand what you're up to, you have to, that's a piece of work. Okay. And if you try to get, and sometimes simple sentences as opposed to complicated sentences that try to capture several concepts in every sentence don't have that quality. So if you want to write the process piece first and see whether you're done, then I would say do that. But what I hear, and maybe I'm not hearing it correctly, is an effort to write a simple paragraph in which you've got both your priorities and your process. And it doesn't matter to me, and I wouldn't suggest that I know better. It's okay with me if you could, I wouldn't have any problem with the idea that you describe your process and don't even speak of things as priorities, just describe the process. Here's what we're going to do first. Here's what we're going to do second. And these are implicit in there, or actually explicit in there, will be the criteria that you look at first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Okay. It doesn't matter how you frame it. I just think that what I'm hearing here is a sort of bafflement about the product that you want, because I know you want something that's very clear. It's not a technical, it's not only understood by the people who wrote the sentences. That's what I'm concerned about. This happens a lot. Okay, when governments, for example, are writing regulations. Okay, so I don't know how else to put it other than that you may have to. There's a sort of simplification that you're going to have to do that is the opposite of trying to get everything into simple sentences, which is may not be possible.
Tony, go for it.
Yeah, just one clarification. We had the question, why is competitiveness a lower priority? I mean, the edit today was to take out that question because competitiveness is not a lower priority. Instead, we were going to say competitiveness as an additional consideration. So just to say that. But then the other comment I was going to make is in 2011, they had one priority, which was voter preference data and domination. And they didn't take into account any of these things. So, well, the VRA, but so we are so far light years ahead of what was done in 2011 and probably what may come out of the other maps later this year from the legislature if they choose to. So, personally, I don't think we can get away from, in some manner, ranking our priorities. We can call them stages of priority, but they're there. And if we try to confuse people with them, we may just confuse them. So I'm just putting in my 2 cents that I like the way it is.
I do too. I think it's strong.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the document here, guys, or anything else from the line draws committee? We can take a look at some corrections that Jack sent out as well, just to kind of see how that applies. And you know, kind of represent it to the group again, since we don't have a complete hard stop on this. And, you know, I think definitely rolling in, as Susan was saying, rolling it into, you know, our session where we're doing our line draws, as well as kind of rolling it into when we're going to submit it to for public opinion as well, will kind of guide us in the directions that we need to go with it as well.
One thing,
Go ahead, Mary.
sorry, just
Yeah.
to jump in, on a process point, the solicitation of comments on the criteria, I just don't believe that that's the proper mechanism to do it. I think the term, you know, when we're talking about comments, I think it's a capital C comments in the way of, like, legally we need to abide by certain rules if we're going to solicit input, if you all are going to solicit input. So I just wanted to raise that as a point. And then I think, Jack, if we can probably circle back with what the proper mechanism to do that is, but I don't believe it's through our internal process. If we're going to solicit comments, which, excuse me, if you all are going to solicit comments, the weight of those comments and the what we're going to do with them, what you all are going to do with them, is just a point to consider. And I know it's been something that has been spoken about with this group, but just that's all I'll say on it. But if we do it, I don't believe that's the proper mechanism, and I'll stop there.
Well, yeah, there's a way for you guys to take comments on the criteria put out. I think it's worthy of further discussion. It sounds like maybe there's some camps here. We can talk about it. I don't have anything further to add right now, but it sounds like maybe there's some things to iron out about what those criteria are and how they'll be presented before we take any comment. And yeah, that's all I've got to say right now.
I'll say goodnight, but also just things are going really well. You're right on track, and I'm feeling really optimistic about the direction everything's going. See you soon.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks, Liz, as well.
Chris,
Go ahead, Howard.
can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm familiar with what I think Jack and others are talking about with regard to taking comments and how that's governed in general. And what I'm hearing is references to what I think, and Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, things like the Administrative Procedures Act and that kind of stuff, where you're taking comments on proposed rules. Is that correct? Those the strictures you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think that's what Maddie was referring to. And I don't think they necessarily apply here, though we would want to mimic any
Right. That's my
process that the state government uses in any sense.
Right. That's what I was hoping, that this is sui generis. This is not an example of writing rules that has
Right.
a lot of legislation that governs that. So what I thought was happening is that you all, the commission, is going to prepare a document, however you do it, whatever text it has, that describes what you want to describe, and it's going to go out in whatever way you want it to be publicized. You are then going to get feedback, and having gotten the feedback, you will go back to your document, and if you feel like it, you will edit your document pursuant to the feedback. The idea that other people, I will tell you, you will boggle your minds if you try to incorporate comments in a text, because they're going to come, if you're successful in getting a lot of participation, they're going to come in all sorts of language choices and in all sorts of directions. They're going to be contradictory with each other. They're not going to be handed to you in a manner that's easily inserted into your text. Okay, that's the sort of thing that concerns me. So there needs to be something, you need to have a document that you are grounded on, that you are at least tentatively confident about, it's fairly clear, so that when you get your feedback, however you get it, you can then look back into your document and say, now that we've heard from these people, here's something I want to change. Here's something else I want to change, or not. Okay, I'm concerned about a sort of chaos, about a potential for chaos. That is a possible side effect of a lot of public participation by a lot of people who are not driven by the same set of norms that you are about language choices and what belongs together and all that sort of thing. It's going to come in however they want to frame it.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, I was sort of trying to avoid injecting myself too much here, but what I think is along the lines of what Howard said, that to invite comment on the criteria, whether it's a formalized comment process or any comment that you'll take into consideration, is to possibly open up a can of worms that just won't close, because we'll take comment and then you can change them. And then people have comments on that. And the reason for the 8 congressional district hearings and the reason you took all the input in those hearings and listened to experts was so that you could come up with these things. So, you know, it isn't my place to make a final decision, but I will give you that my opinion is that you guys have listened to a lot. You've come up with some, in my view, great criteria. Whether they are tweaked some to add competitiveness or the wording is different doesn't really change the fact that you have heard a lot of substance and come to a good, so far a good working decision and hopefully a good formalized decision, or all signs point to it being a good formal decision soon. To take more public comment on these criteria is simply to, you know, invite more uncertainty and a process that may never end. That's my opinion. You guys are on the commission. You'll vote on what you're going to do, but it sounds like nothing's going to get wholly resolved tonight. But to take more comment when we've already, that was the point of the hearings, I thought, at least, doesn't seem wise to me.
Yeah.
Is it possible to satisfy that through doing a structured, another hearing, a session, and
Yeah,
then
so-
also through the map submission process?
So
Because
we
that
had
is essentially that is public comment by putting the maps into districtr. So are those two things?
Sure. I guess I don't mean to say like you shut yourself off from the public. No, I mean the absolute opposite of that.
Of
One thing that Molly and Maddie and I had spoken to Chris, Chair Ford, about was the possibility of a formal, which it seems that some other people came up with this idea all on their own, which is awesome. A formal hearing to sort of announce and take whether it's expert feedback or even some public at that point about the criteria. It's just that like opening up a round of internet comments, it just seems to me that that's why we let people talk to you freely and openly in 8 congressional district hearings. And still welcome to criticize the work, you know, or give their opinions on it. And again, if through that process you hear an outpour that already exists, an outpouring of negativity about one thing, well, hey, I mean, you're right. You're in the driver's seat. I feel like you can change it. But it seems to me that it's like Howard was sort of saying, good, just like draw that line. You're confident in your decision, move on. And I don't mean to mischaracterize you, Howard, but
That's fine. And I will just say one other thing, and this is a little off the point. People are going to look for their comments in your text. Okay, the more comments you take, the more they still see what somebody talks to you about healthcare. Okay, I've been watching all the hearings, and sometimes the people talk to you about substantive issues. Okay, very often they do, as opposed to about redistricting. And they're gonna, if they come and they make a comment, and you listen to them, and then they look at your text, and they're going to see, because you're not dealing with substantive issues, it's not in there. And their conclusion can easily be, they weren't listening to me. Because they think, apparently, that those things they're saying are appropriate about what healthcare policy ought to be, or water, or you know, other kinds of environmental policies ought to be, that they're unsatisfied with. They're not parsing out the difference between the redistricting process and the outcomes that they're eventually hoping to get out of the legislature and the governor. So I just think that the more you don't, I know that you do not want to tease them about the impact of their inputs. And I think there's a possibility of doing that. They're gonna look for their inputs in your product.
I'm just going to jump in here, to sort of defend public comments around the substantive issues, Howard. I think many of the public comments we've heard have referenced substantive issues, but through the lens of responsiveness and the lack of responsiveness regarding those policies. But I mean, I hear what you're saying for sure. And also to Jack's point and Howard's initial point too, Elizabeth and I, as part of the outreach committee weeks ago, sort of came to this conclusion as well, just to put it out there that, us as commission members thought that, to Jack's point, the congressional district hearings themselves have been extensive and have included a ton of public comments that we have used to inform these criteria. And so a public opportunity for public comment through a forum or internet comments wouldn't be as necessary. And instead, something like what Tony threw in the chat there and what Jack referenced, a separate hearing highlighting what we came up with, again, emphasizing this is based on the public testimony we've heard over the months and the expert testimony. The one concern is that the language around the tiering and the fact that all of those public comments that Howard was referring to around substantive issues was getting at the responsiveness, which is related to the competitiveness of the districts. And so again, we should be just really clear about how the early stages, or however we're going to word it, of the criteria make it so that they're competitive kind of automatically, right? Like, and that's what the language, I think, Anne-Marie, you included in the email, it emphasizes that, which is great. And so we have to, in that hearing, also emphasize that and make it clear that we're not ignoring competitiveness. By all means, we're going to look at how competitive things are or not afterwards, right? And we say that in the criteria as well. But there are other things that are coming before that ultimately, hopefully, will lead to competitive and fair districts from a partisan perspective. But I agree that we shouldn't necessarily open it up to public comment, because we've had public comment, right? That's what the hearings were. But we should have, to be transparent, right? We should definitely have a separate hearing.
Yeah. And again, that was something that was planned. We had discussed in April. And Mariano, you had something to.
Yeah, I understand the trouble with getting public comment on the criteria. We have dealt with this and thought about it a lot. So, those arguments of we've already gotten the feedback that we need already to make those decisions are totally legit. So the hearing, I'm just interested in ideas on what that hearing would be like. Would we have any experts there? Would it just be the commissioners reviewing that one document that is the kind of like the simplistic document, or would we have something where we would have more rationale why we chose the things that we chose?
If you have a rationale, okay, now I think that Commissioner Rangel was just speaking to the rationale that I've heard you express, which is that the process that you have in mind and the criteria that you have in mind are going to wind up with the result of responsible addressing of the competitiveness. That's going to be an outcome. The competitiveness will be addressed by implication, or as a sort of effect of the other judgments that you've made. That's what you're writing about now, and that can be explained. I think if you're going to have a hearing, one of the purposes of the hearing may be to say, here's where we are in terms of the criteria, here's where we are, and here's our rationale. 2, here's our rationale, and 3, here's our process going forward. So you know what's happening, you know what we've done, you know where we are, and you know where we're going. Okay, and if the experts if you want to have experts there, they might give you advice about the going forward, the map drawing and so on and so forth. They're actually probably going to tell you what you already know, but if it's a hearing, then the public will get to hear the interaction between you and the experts. so that they will hear how you're about to operate is based on good advice from experts, which I think it is. I mean, this isn't some sort of sham. This isn't some sort of manipulation of the public. It's what you're actually doing. You're landing on criteria, and you have a rationale, and you're going to go forward with a process of making maps out of that rationale, as I understand it. And if you want to have a hearing, that seems to me to be an agenda that gives the public actual, very specific, very explicit knowledge of what's happening in the commission.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I think that this is something that we can, in the interest of time, with 6:30 end date here in time, I think we can discuss it about how we're going to proceed, and I think Susan's idea is really good in terms of doing the district or the train the trainer event here, and then trying to formulate a rollout of how we're going to roll out our criterion and what we need to do in terms of making sure the public is reflected in that and is being heard upon that. But I agree. I think going the route of our actions will be shown in what we have created in our product that we've created, and it is something that is malleable and something that we can continue to reflect upon. And I agree. I don't think this is going to be worked out tonight, unfortunately. So, all right. With regards to community of interest, I know you guys had some updates as well, so we can go ahead and move to that if you guys had anything. I know there was a meeting that was on the horizon.
I don't have anything new to share, just that we are meeting either Friday or Monday. We've been discussing a meeting time, unless anyone else has anything else they want to contribute for the good of the group.
Okay. All right, so we'll look for updates on that as well. As far as community outreach, Ben and Liz, I know you guys have talked a little bit about it, but anything in particular?
Yeah, we didn't meet in between the district hearing and today, so I don't think we have any updates. Just Molly, I know, has been doing a good job on the Twitter, at least I checked last during the hearing. And so I assume we can continue to use the Twitter to advertise the train the trainer events as they approach here. That might be a good idea. Molly, I was just going to actually email you about that. But yeah, we didn't meet, so nothing else.
That's okay. Tony, I know you had some comments about the splash page too, but feel free to go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to ask a question of Ben and other people on the outreach committee. What is, like, if I want to send my people out there, the public, hey, go check out the website to learn about what we're doing. Can you put in the chat room what it is? What is the website address that we tell people to look at? But as a second question, can we simplify that? I know that Fair Maps Wisconsin is fairmapswi.com. Can we make it something simple like that? Like, hey, go to peoplesmapwisconsin.com or something. So that's my question.
Yeah, we don't have any say over the website. That's Maddie and Jack thing. That's all through the governor's office, I'm pretty sure. But the Twitter, you can just say, follow us on Twitter, and then you just have to reference the handle, the Twitter handle, which I can throw in the chat here. But yeah, Maddie shared the website, wisconsin.gov/peoplesmaps. And then the Twitter is WI Peoples Maps. So if somebody were to go on Twitter, for instance, and just search for WI Peoples Maps, our Twitter handle should come up, and then you follow it. Every time I've Googled just Peoples Maps Wisconsin, our website is the first hit. Yeah. But if you are communicating with people via email, Tony, I would just hyperlink directly the website so that there's no confusion in terms of how they access it. I don't know if there's a different way you're communicating with friends or networks.
Well, that's what I'm anticipating. I'm anticipating that all of us want to get it out there and say, this is our main site for like when we publish our report and the criteria. And so how do we tell everybody the media? In the chat, so I think, I think Maddie put it on the chat, and I guess that's not so difficult, especially if we can copy and paste that into emails and everything. Not quite as easy as fairmapswi.com, but
Yeah, government protocol.
Yeah.
One thing I would add too is when I send you the graphics, I'm making you bit.ly links, which are shortened links that go specifically to things within the website. So when I was sending you the graphics documents, you'll notice in there there'll be specific small links to like the feedback form. There'll be a small link to the hearing YouTube channel. So those, if there are other links that you would like shortened, I'm happy to do that for you. But that's one thing too that we've been sending out for you to use in either your social or emails or whatever makes sense.
And if I remember correctly, Molly, usually in some of those emails you include an example template with the Twitter handle in there if it's something tweetable. And so maybe if you haven't, I can't remember, also include, well, you include the links, the bit.lys, right? So that's fine. And so as long as there's something to easily copy and paste to, that should be easy for the commissioners to do.
Yep.
Okay.
Chris, did you want me to, I mean, I can bring up.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's a little more difficult, but
Yeah.
I would hope that the website page will be as completely nonpartisan as possible. Scrubbed for, not for lack of partisanship, and maybe that's enough for tonight. I think that is our goal, but just kind of think of it from the conservative angle, from the Republican angle. We're trying to change people's minds. We're trying to educate more people. So this is our main site, we've decided, for how we're going to educate people. This is our main site for how we're going to inform people. And there's both what we say, but there's also how it's presented. And I just want us to keep that in mind.
I appreciate that feedback, Commissioner Phillips. And if there are specific things that folks want to discuss, I have full editing privileges on the website. I think the one note is that at the end of the day, that the Democratic governor created this commission. And so I think we have like kind of a little bit of not attention, just like that's the acknowledgement, obviously, and the understanding that we want to talk about the nexus of the commission, just for transparency's sake, especially. And then also for all the resources and everything like that, that we're keeping in mind the nonpartisanship. But if there are resources or sources or things like that that we have listed, happy to have that discussion offline too, to make sure that it meets everything that y'all are considering.
Yeah, Commissioner Phillips discussed via email earlier in the week too. There may be some things with the orientation of the website. Kind of placing some videos that we have done kind of forefront on the splash page, and maybe a good way to go about it. But again, we can discuss it a little bit later on too. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on community outreach, guys? Okay. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. So, all right. So we'll go ahead and go to project management. Anne-Marie, I know you get your plate full, but anything else in particular than what was described today and we'll discuss today?
Nope.
Okay. Expert selection. I know we pretty much get everybody here, but we can reach out to some of those expert testimony providers as we move forward. They'll kind of be a part of the plan and sort of rolling out our criterion, as well as going forward with our meetings here on out, just to kind of stay in the forefront. So. And I didn't have anything from lessons learned at this point in time. Any other questions, comments, concerns before we go ahead and wrap up, guys? I think we got a good direction where we're going. Tony, you have anything?
Yeah. Are we tentatively planning on the 30th? Don't we have a meeting on the 30th at Maddie?
Yeah, that sounds right. Let me just pull it up. Yes, Tuesday the 30th at 4:30 is the next working meeting.
Okay.
And I'll send around that link.
Thanks, Maddie.
And so just to be clear, in terms of our like outreach, to Moon's point, to our networks, I know we had sent Maddie sort of like a request to gather lists of people to communicate with. What type of action steps should we be responsible for in terms of getting the trainer events on people's agendas? Should I just be reaching out to my network whenever, or are we waiting for something?
That's a good question. I guess we could go either way. I've been slowly chipping away at some standard template emails for you all. If that's something that would be helpful for people, just to have like, if this, then here's what you can send, just to kind of make it standardized across the board, if that works. Yeah. And then we're continuing to work on those outreach lists as well, identifying the contacts, and with the obviously deadline that is fast approaching in mind here for the end of the month. We also have all of the folks obviously who have already testified, which is in the thousands. So there's a couple good buckets that can mesh into lists that are being segmented out by CD that you all can blast out.
Maddie, you bring up an excellent summary point there of when we do have a hearing. I don't know if it'd be the COI one or the one with the criteria, but just summarizing how many comments we got and everything, that'd be really great. We could mention that. Chair Ford can mention that or something.
Absolutely. All right. Susan, did you have anything? I'm sorry. Since you're muted. Okay. All right, guys. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out, and I appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you pretty soon. Oh, Tony, you have one? Sorry. Oh, you just wave it. Okay. Sounds good. All right. All right, guys. Thanks.